Going to call to order this regular meeting of the Perrysburg Board of Education, January 18th, 2022. Mr. Drewer, will you start with roll call, please?
Ms. Larimer.
Here.
Mrs. Eubank.
Here.
Dr. Rufford.
Here.
Mr. Pullman.
Here.
Mr. Bennington.
Here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, before we begin, I'd like to read the safety briefing. Perrysburg Schools welcomes you to the Commodore Building, and thank you for attending tonight's board meeting. We care about the safety of our students, staff, families, and guests. Please note that there are exits in the east and west sides of the cafeteria. In case of emergencies, an AED is located just outside the cafeteria doors. You are located at 140 East Indiana Avenue. Thank you for supporting Perrysburg Schools. All right. So welcome everybody in attendance. Welcome those that are watching live or will be joining this stream later on. So moving into the proposed agenda, we have one change from a board member, and that is pulling item 14.2, the district master calendar, out and moving that to item, I believe, 15, and then all the other subsequent numbers will get changed accordingly. So with that change, do I have a motion to approve the modified agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Eubanks, thank you. Roll call, please. Ms. Larimer. Ms. Eubanks, second.
Yes. Oh, okay. I thought. Yes.
Mrs. Eubank.
Yes.
Dr. Rufford.
Yes.
Mr. Pullman.
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes. All right, we'll start. It's January, which is Board Recognition Month, and I think I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Hostler.
Thank you, and certainly we appreciate the meeting this evening and having an opportunity to celebrate our local school board and appreciate those members. So we do have a couple things that we wanted to hand out. You do have some things that some students put together for you at your desks. So it's always great to see and hear about what those notes are. And we appreciate all the teachers and administrators who help put this together to show appreciation from the students who matter most with what we do. I have a certificate from the Ohio School Board Association, and then if we could take a moment for a quick picture, we'd like to do that. So, but I do have something I'd like to read and just to kind of give perspective. The month of January provides a unique opportunity to acknowledge a special group of volunteer elected officials in education. It's School Board Recognition Month, and it gives us a way to acknowledge the continuing efforts of our school board members in providing leadership and guidance to our schools and community. Our board members who dedicate countless hours of work to improving the education for Perrysburg children. School board members take that responsibility and public trust very seriously, dedicating a significant number of hours to their work both in and outside board meetings, attending school functions, preparing for board meetings, reading financial reports, preparing agendas, making proposals, and making a host of difficult and challenging decisions are just a few of the regular activities that board members must participate in their service. Our board members have lives outside serving on the board. They really do. So they are parents, grandparents, professionals, and active members of the community. Their commitment to ensure they stay up to date on the latest educational issues here in the district, across the state and the nation is to be admired. Today, more than ever, school board leaders are faced with the overwhelming charge of ensuring all students achieve their greatest potential in the face of the biggest challenges facing this generation of students, staff, and families. These issues weigh heavily on the minds and hearts of these members long after the meetings adjourn. Our board members come from a variety of backgrounds, often with different experiences and views. But working together, they make decisions in the best interest of Perrysburg students. So join me in thanking them for their service. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
So if you could maybe grab your items, and then I'll turn it over to Rachel. Maybe you can help us, Rachel, with
Center on the wall here, right here. Yep, and it needs to be turned just slightly, and then just slightly towards there. This looks like cookies, I'm sorry, no cookies. Okay, if I do this just right, that'll stick in there, there we go, here we go. Everybody's doing their banner white, one step this way? Yeah. Okay.
All right, next on the agenda is a 5-minute break, which I imagine we can dispense with. Other than moving into the next item, public participation. Rachel, can you bring the sign-up list? I suspect we have some folks that would like to speak tonight. So a reminder, this first public participation will be on agenda items only. Thank you. In adherence with board policy, we will allow for 2 minutes of time at the podium. This is an opportunity that we welcome participation to hear. This will not be we will not address comments back. However, you will receive a comment back from either myself or Mr. Hostler as appropriate. So starting with Mr. Desser, if you want to come to the podium. And again, please state your name and residence for the record.
We just want to make sure it's still you.
I'm still David Desser, 10122 Wyandotte Place. Future revenue issues. We have a constant increase in students. We have 4 buildings between 55 and 80 years old. We have athletic facilities not located at the high school, which is a liability issue. We have a school in Maumee that we rent. We have about 9 trailers in use, it looks like, and more to come. We have ahead of us a replacement or renewal levy in 2024. We have a replacement or renewal levy already planned for 2025, and we probably need a building levy somewhere in there too. At board meetings, I've heard many times about Perrysburg planning for more funding from the state of Ohio. Schools currently get over half of the state general fund. The budget's $27 billion is the school funding altogether, and that's half of the general fund. Medicaid and Social Security get about 1/3 more. So we're over 80% on just 2 things, schools and Medicaid social services.
Thank you.
For the district to get more from the state above inflation, what would the state possibly cut to create more money? To get 20% more from the state, we'd have to come up with $5 billion more dollars. And it's just not there in the state funding. We keep adding programs and we keep adding staff that are not classroom teachers. Way too little attention is paid to the cost and sustainability of these programs and initiatives. We need transparency and a comprehensive plan that addresses all of these issues. No more Band-Aid solutions like what snuck up on the taxpayers in 2019 that leaves us with more financial issues later. If we were to avoid the potential layoffs and program disruptions that were just a few months away in 2019, we must act sooner and plan better. Thank you.
Next, we have Ms. Werner. I'm not clear what, it says contracts? Please, okay. And again, please state your
I said
name
you
and
you
address.
definitely know me well. Cam Warner, live on River Road. I have 3 students in the school district.
Please.
Okay. Contracts. They are developed to hold participants accountable to specified terms and outline ramifications if terms are not met. Contracts can be broken. I'll bet there are probably penalties for that, but sometimes the penalties are worth it because continuing with the contract is more detrimental than the penalty for exiting the agreement. Perrysburg School District has a contract with the government where the district accepted $253 per student. In exchange, the district agreed to provide mental health services, follow COVID mandates developed by the government, and to incorporate copious amounts of SEL curriculum in the classrooms. These mandates have proven to be controversial and detrimental to our kids and their educational journey. As these destructive concepts collapse one by one, there's nothing left to say, but we told you so. Community members warned against the mental, physical, and emotional toll masks would have on our children's education. It is time you come to grips with the realization that a respiratory virus cannot be defeated. It is time that Perrysburg Schools initiates an exit plan from this contract so ESSER 3 funds are not received this spring, thus further tying Perrysburg Schools to these unlawful COVID mandates. By continuing to accept ESSER money, you are wrecking the educational journey of our children and thus making them surplus victims as a result of your contractual decisions. And while money is a huge component of this situation, this is bigger than money. You are leading our children down a path of conformity, which will result in their lack of critical thinking skills, social deprivation, and a life of complacency. All this because of a government contract that the designated leader of this school district signed. Unfortunately, this leader hasn't woken up and realized the terms of the contract have changed. It is no longer beneficial for Perrysburg to be part of this bad business decision. See through the government's devious plan to control our schools.
Ms. Warner, that's time. Please finish up.
And do not accept any more ESSER money.
Next, we have Ms. Ulrich. Again, please state your name and address for the record.
Tracy Ulrich, 148 Mark Lane.
Apologize for pronouncing your name wrong.
That's okay.
Ulrich. Go ahead.
So it's been clear that the federal government has taken over the public schools. They are using the ESSER money and the grants to control what school districts like us are teaching our children. There's much evidence of this through the Freedom of Information Acts, through website that we've been researching ourselves. And if anybody would like to see that, please contact me because I have plenty of evidence to prove that. I guess what I want to know is what's the end game here? Like, where does this end? Do we just, we were told 14 days, right? We were told all these things, and none of that has become true. When do we get to take the masks off our children? I am in multiple schools in the country, or in the state, I should say. I can go in one school, no masks anywhere. I can go down a mile, masks everywhere. Like, it's blows my mind, and it makes me sad. Every time I go in the school, I'm so happy for those kids that aren't having to wear their mask. But then I think, my God, this is even more evidence that my own granddaughter is, being pushed to have this mask on every day and struggling. I mean, I can see what it is doing to her mental health. I can see that it is giving her less hope for the future. I mean, she actually even said to me, I don't know why I'm doing this 25 minutes of SEL in the morning to talk about our feelings. If we didn't wear a mask, I could tell how everybody is feeling. That's coming from a second grader. So, I mean, I would love to have brought her. My son would have killed me. But he, she can tell you exactly how she feels. It's not good for these kids. It is not. And I'm just done. I'm so tired of watching her sparkle dull, and that's what's happening. She's not liking school. We never had that before at all, and it's just pathetic, honestly.
That's time. Please finish up.
Okay. So the teachers are not psychologists. Why are you collecting data on our children, and what are you doing with that data? The non-disclosure and lack of transparency that is happening is not okay. Thank you.
So I don't know if this is an agenda item specifically, but we've already kind of broached the subject, so we'll go ahead and continue. Ms. Thistleway? Again, please state your address, name for the record.
My name is Carrie Thistlewait. I live at 14848 Roachton Road. My husband and I have 4 children currently in the Perrysburg school system, 3 in high school, and 1 in the elementary school at Fort Meigs. Thank you for the opportunity to address the board this evening. Tonight I would like to speak specifically to my recent experience with the rollout of the Panorama Survey back in November. Let me first state that it is merely my intent to impress upon the board how dismissed I have felt with regards to my rights as a parent to be properly informed and to have the ability, according to board policy manual, to opt my child out if I so choose. By speaking up and pressing on this issue, I know that I'm not just voicing my concerns, but those of other parents as well. In my opinion, there is a clear disconnect between our Perrysburg administration and parents, which has left us both feeling quite frustrated. One reason is likely lack of communication. There was so little communicated to parents regarding the Panorama Survey that I had to ask many questions and learn through my own research what it actually is. It is a third-party survey. It is sold by Panorama as a survey, the Ohio Department of Education lists it as a survey, and many, many other school districts have considered it such. Regardless of how relevant or useful I believe it will be, this is a new, individually identifiable survey that is being administered to every student in our district, with intent to administer it 2 to 3 times a year, yet parents are still not being improperly informed. Why not? As a parent, it is my primary right, authority, and responsibility to direct the education of my children. I feel like that right has been challenged over this issue so much that I filed a formal complaint to Mr. Hostler, subsequently to the board president, which has sat completely unacknowledged for a total of 56 days now. I'm concerned that the focus has shifted so much on amplifying the student's voice that there is very little attention or importance being given to the role of parents who, again, have the right, authority, and responsibility of directing their children. Thank you.
Ms. Menke? Okay, thank you. And Ms. Vandervell.
So I'm not sure, I don't know how this works, but because it was discussed in a work session, is that considered a board meeting tonight?
I'd look at this as we're going to be talking about the calendar. It's somewhat related to that, so go ahead.
Lisa Vandervlecht. I live at 836 Walnut Street. My husband and I have 2 grown children that graduated in 2010 and 11. In 11 through 14, I was a school bus driver. My high school route was the Heights. It was, nobody wanted that route, and I enjoyed it for the 3 years I did. I believe even as a bus driver, you can have influential moments with kids, and I did. I learned all my students' names. None of this really matters to what I'm going to say, but just a little bit about myself, and called them by name. They actually started speaking back to me, which if you've been around any kind of high school kids, that's almost a miracle when they speak back, speak to you or even acknowledge you. So last night, I'm like, I've never watched a work session or the board meeting online before. I've come to some board meetings. And I watched it, and I was only like 8 minutes in, and I'm like, okay, they're moving the room of the work session. And if Mrs. Eubank hadn't even brought up if it would still be able to be videotaped, it was almost like it was just gonna be, we're gonna discuss it, we can't, we're changing rooms because of Wednesday, which Tuesday used to be the day, and I understand you take into account all the new board members and everybody's schedule, but it appears if you watch it, minutes 8 through 12, I don't even know that Thursday was a consideration. And Mrs. Larimer brought it up, Mrs. Eubank did, but I just think there needs to be continued transparency, and all the big districts in our area, Washington Local, Anthony Wayne, Sylvania, Toledo Public, they all managed to be able to videotape. I mean, and Mr. Bennington did email me back. Actually, I want to acknowledge, Mr. Pullman emailed me, Mrs. Larimer, Mr. Hassler, and Mr. Bennington all emailed me back after last night. Oops, and I'm out of time. Okay, well, yeah, I really hope that we can find a way. With cell phones, we should be able to put those work sessions out to the public. So, thank you.
Thank you. So that's it for the discussion topics related to agenda items. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh my goodness, there's 2 sides to this page. And this is, we don't have this on specifically for our agenda. But there will be an opportunity at the end of the meeting to discuss it. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you for your comments. Next, we're going to move to Mr. Hassler, the superintendent's report.
Thank you. So just wanted to give a little bit of a update on staffing issues. I know that since coming back from break, we've heard a lot about districts not being able to come back in person, and we've had situations where we've had to double up on routes and those kinds of things. So we just wanted to spend a little bit of time to give an update of where we are. For us, we know across the country right now there is a number of staffing needs for industries ranging from Kroger, Churchill's, to schools to major manufacturers, and so we're really not immune from that as well. Right now, we're really scrambling to piece together on any given day staffing plans to operate schools, to keep kids in school and not have to cancel, and also to get kids to and from school. So that is always our priority. We want to say thank you to our central office staff member, Erica, who works with ASOP, so that's the employee software form that we use to connect substitutes with vacancies. So her day begins about 4 a.m. And uploading, who's out, what's not covered, begins to call, to email, doing what she can, and then communicating to the buildings as to what their day is going to look like based on the staffing levels. So we've been successful in keeping the students in school, and it's really due to the flexibility and willingness of staff like Erica and others who are willing to do whatever they need to make it happen. So getting folks to come together, to cover duties and responsibilities that aren't theirs is something that I think we've done across the board to make that happen. Each day we're working on what tomorrow looks like. So at the end of the day, we begin to look to see who's coming back, who might be out, and then that goes through the entire evening. And then that morning, principals are looking at where they can find and change their schedule to cover for those holes that are created in each area. So when you take a look at the COVID cases per week, this is the beginning of the school year and takes us up to last week, where as you can see, last week was the worst week that we've had with the number of cases for students and certainly a high one for staff. So that's 3 weeks of high cases for staff members. So you can see that this is trending, certainly in a way that's very challenging for our students and families, but also for staff as well. The report, this is from last Thursday, where we get a printout of every position that's up, that's classified. Those are folks that are bus drivers, custodians, secretaries, aides, monitors, cooks, and then also our teachers. So this particular day at this time, we were only able to cover 60% of the vacant positions in the district. So of every 10 phone calls we received telling us there wouldn't be anyone there, 4 we couldn't fill. But on that particular day, the principals, the supervisors, folks rearranged their days and did what was needed to do that. We often get questions. Right now we have about 171 substitutes on our list. 180 is a nice number compared to previous years, so we're close to our target. But the absences of our staff has increased significantly with the number of COVID cases, either for themselves or for a child that they have to stay home and care for. We also know that many subs that are on that list, because they're on the list doesn't mean they're working every day. Some have other commitments. Others are, like right now, not wanting to come in and risk getting COVID, so they're sitting it out until things calm down a little bit. So we're very short on subs across the board. In times where we don't have COVID, we're usually over 180 and have more than enough, but for various reasons, there's folks that aren't wanting to come in and then challenging that. On January 27th, we're having a job fair, so we're again looking for teacher, monitor, food service, bus drivers, parapros, and custodian substitutes. So this is an important opportunity for us to get the word out. We're also looking for homebound instructors and paraprofessionals permanently, so those aren't substitute positions. And we want to make sure that those that are interested, stop in. And there's no need to sign up, and for more information, they can go out to the website to do that. So even with the staff shortages that we have to be somewhat selective because we're working with children. So unlike other places where they just need necessarily a warm body to fill that void, we have to be a little bit selective with what we can use and often what we can allow to work with students. So we're hoping that the word gets out on the 27th. The last one resulted in a really positive uptick with subs, and we're hoping that this does another shot in the arm for us as well. So that's kind of where we are. We're continuing to stay the course with what we're doing. We're not looking to revert to canceling school unless we get to a situation where a building just can't operate. And so far right now, the absences have been kind of evenly distributed through the different buildings, and we've been able to accomplish, keeping them open. So hopefully that won't change. If it does, we'll certainly have to talk to families. I know tomorrow morning, for example, this may be the first time, but we're looking at our preschool. Half of the teachers will not be in tomorrow. We know that now, so we're working to secure subs. As we just talked about, that process will go on. If we have anyone who drops out overnight, that could be a challenge. School starts at 9 a.m., so we'll know very early to notify those parents if we have to cancel. So that would be the first time this year that we're looking at having to make a decision like that. So hopefully we'll hold and be able to operate school tomorrow at the preschool, but it is something that we're looking at, and every day is that way. So when we get to this time at night, we're counting noses and seeing what we can do. So open up to any questions that folks may have or otherwise.
Questions or comments?
What's the plan for, I see the lake sent out a letter, because they're so desperate like other school districts. We have that key plan, like 24-hour notice for babysitters for the kids.
If we have the ability to let folks know, I mean, we will. The situation I just described really is I think it accents the challenges that we have. So right now, we have enough to make it work tomorrow. We have one more teacher in that building that does go out. That call may come at 6 a.m., it may come at midnight, or it might not come at all. So how do we react to that in that moment is a real challenge. So, letting families know that this could be a possibility so they can be prepared is certainly something that we can do. But some of the other buildings, what they've done is they've just reached a level and they've shut down the district to try to get that 5 days where people can feel better and get to the other side of it. So they've kind of used that break that we just came off of as a buffer to do that. So right now we're able to operate. So for us, there wasn't a need to do that because we're able to maintain. So, but if we do get to a situation, canceling school for a few days to try to regroup, that would probably be something that we would do. So.
We could still just, maybe one building would go down, but the rest would be
Right.
functioning. Okay.
And we had that happen last year. Hall Prairie was the first one that went down. We just didn't have enough subs. And that was the beginning of a time where we ended up going remote for some time just because of the number of cases. And last year, the difference is, and we hear from folks who are saying, why aren't we all remote? Look at the cases. The cases that we had just showed for students is almost triple or quadruple what we had when we shut down last year. There's a couple differences. I think one of them is last year we didn't have access to the vaccine, and we do today for many of our students. So that is a big change. And we know that, with the steps that we're taking continually in contact tracing and following the guidelines, masking, those pieces are helping us stay open. We're not seeing the kind of classroom spreads that other places are, where there aren't those precautions in place. And the other thing too is we're learning from what we can and can't do with the virus, just like all of us. We understand that there are certain situations that we react to this way or that way. In all of our lives, I think we've made adjustments to how we operate, and I think we're trying to do that as a school as well. So our goal is to keep students in school, to keep staff and students safe. And we're grateful that the staff has really stepped up to make that possible. So, giving up lunches and, planning periods to cover for a colleague and all those kinds of things are happening every day. And the students have done a great job of adjusting as well. So, but ultimately our goal is to keep moving forward and doing what we can. And we should, looking at the trends, we should see the numbers start to decrease, hopefully.
They have. I looked it up
So.
before the meeting. In Wood County, they've decreased the last 2 days, hospitalizations and cases, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
So do we have a plan moving forward then on masks and when we think we will go back to optional masks?
So we have, because, as we have started out without masks and we had to go to masks and then
Right.
we tried it again. So when we begin to take a look at our numbers, certainly we need to be down below 127 cases in a week where we are last week. So when you look at those decisions, when we were down in the low teens for the number of cases, and we had a couple of weeks of that, that's when we made the decision the last time. So as we see the numbers start to fall again, we'd be happy to do that. We were willing to try it before. We're willing to try it again, but the numbers have to be there. And I think that's been the difference. So right now, it's really hard to talk about when that will happen, when we've seen the numbers significantly rise in the last 3 weeks. So our main focus right now is trying to get, the schools open tomorrow. And once we begin to see those trends downward and hold, we'll be happy to take another shot at it like we have in the past, so.
Did you read the article about the CDC saying that the cloth masks do not help with the Omicron variant?
Yeah, who can you believe anymore though, Kelly? You know what I'm saying?
Well, we do follow their recommendations.
Yeah, we
so,
do.
I mean,
So, so part of it,
The thing is, who can you
so I
trust
think
anymore?
part of the masking piece is Right now, the masks allow us to, with the contact tracing, without the mask, that really makes things more complicated as to who's in a mask and who isn't. And then keeping track of the students who come back from an exposure and they have to mask for so long. So when you think about 127 students who are COVID positive, the students that were directly around them, those students returning would all have to be masked. There would have to be record keeping of each one of those. So if those 127 students all had 10 students that were around them in direct contact who were unmasked, they're coming in being close contact, that's now we're 1,200 in 1 week that we're now beginning to juggle. So having everyone in masks eliminate our staff from having to do that, because we check that box for everybody. So part of it is just how do we manage this based on the rules that we have to follow? And when we begin to take that step away from masking, that steps up our responsibility in tracking and keeping track and tabs on, when masks come off, when they go on. And right now we don't have to do that. And because of the number of cases that we're experiencing, that would be very challenging for us to do. We wouldn't be able to do it. So that's the other component of masking that's important. So.
Any other questions or comments?
I did want to point out, it is important to note, though, for preschool, that the staffing ratio is state-driven, which is a lot smaller. So if you don't have the teachers or the TAs or the paras there, it's not like an elementary school, so you have to have a certain number of adults in the classroom for the classroom to be open. And I think we forget about that a lot. And the young age of the children, can't keep it open if we don't have the adults.
Yeah, that's just it. That's our risk there, is getting the teachers and the adults and supervisors in the classroom, because the kids are coming in, right? That's our goal, keeping these kids in the classroom. And I appreciate all the efforts that are going on, everything from holding job fairs to find bus drivers and classified staff and certified staff, and the work that's going on in the buildings to cover for each other, as Tom noted. I've seen some of that going on too. So everybody's working as hard as they can within our district to keep our kids coming in, because it's not happening in every district right now, as we point out. Other districts are being challenged, are going remote right now. Okay, thank you, Mr. Hostler. Mr. Drewer, you're up. Off to the podium. Yeah, off you go.
Enough sitting for one day.
I like your shirt.
Well, thank you. All right. Mr. Hostler gets me queued up. That one time a month we get to talk about finances. Actually, a fairly short presentation. I just got a few slides to turn it on. It's me, Tom. It's me. Yep, that's me. All right. All right, so in the financial packet, the first page, second page is the general fund summary. We'll spend just a few minutes talking about revenue. There's not much going on. Spend some time talking about expenses and a few things going on in the fiscal office. I want to comment on the revenue side. We are at about 45%. And that's about where we should be. Our big tax collection, our second check comes here. May get a tax advance end of the month, maybe January. We have received our catch up on the Ohio Fair funding. We still don't know exactly what that means on all of our, where it's going to fit into all our funding, where we're on track or not, because we're still working through the formula. It does mean more restricted funds. And we'll talk about it. We'll talk about that down the road a little bit. I also want to point out that while our restricted state aid, is $10–11 million of our total budget, over the next, as I talked about in the 5-year forecast, it's going to, if our enrollment continues to go up, and the state decides to fund the formula, we'll see increased revenue. But that never is going to cover our costs, right? Our increased enrollment's it's got to be paid for locally, and that's just going to be a fact going down the road. And we can talk about that more, particularly when we get in the next couple of months when we get into facilities planning. This is probably the most important chart in there. This is our cash position. The yellow line is this year, and this is normal for us, right? We get 2 big checks a year, essentially, and so we live off those checks until we get to the next pay. And fortunately, if we were down where we were in 2019, I would be not paying bills, waiting for the check to come in, right? Making payroll about all we could do. So we're in good shape cash-wise. We'll have 1 more month, January, and then we'll go back up to our peak. So this is looking normal. It's scary when you're watching your account goes down, but that's just the nature of when you're a locally funded school district. So nothing new on the revenue side. The key drivers are still, we're at with our 20 mil floor. We've seen a little bit of increase in revenue because the effective millage is not dropped. Income tax collections have been ahead of schedule. We have one here in January. There'll be a telling one to see where we are. We're about $1.8 million over last year, the incremental levy being the biggest portion of that. And we're still trying to sort out the state funding adjustments. We got the first payment a couple weeks ago. Friday we'll get our second payment. I've been on a couple calls with ODE trying to understand the formula and understand their calculations. I have some concerns because I don't think they've got our enrollment right, but we're working on it. I think they got about 300 students less than what I would expect, but we'll get that corrected. The expense side, okay, we're at 50%. We're 50% through the school year, and we're about 50% of our expenses. 2 concern areas, and I mentioned this last month, are supply budget and capital outlay. And this chart, I won't go into detail, but we're about 600,000 of higher than what was in the forecast in our spending right now. Now, part of that is just the miss in the transition of treasurers. The capital outlay was wrong, and come to find out, I went back and looked at the budgets and found out there just wasn't enough budgeted. We have one bus lease payment that comes out of that was not included, so that these are going to be adjusted. So our 5-year forecast will probably get adjusted, and a lot of this will be an adjustment. We should be okay. On the supply side, it was one of those things where the forecast didn't reflect the budget from last spring, but we're digging into it, making sure that what we have in there, number one, is right, and number two, we are spending it on the right things. Now, supplies are not a huge part of the budget, but it's one of those few things we have direct control over, right? We can count paper clips and that kind of thing. But still, our biggest expenses are personnel, and will continue to be. And when we talk about growth in the district, we're talking about adding students. That means adding staff, and we've already started having those conversations for next year. If we get the growth, where do we need the staff? Plus, we have some staff that are paid for out of grants and stuff, that those grants go away. Are we going to bring them into the general fund? If the answer is yes, then that's taken into consideration. Now, I've already taken those into account in my forecast, but again, I'm still going to challenge that question. Is paid for grant, you don't need any, do we still need the position, right? And on the ESSER side, we have some staff members paying out of ESSER grants that are specifically looking at that learning loss, closing that gap, right? So which is an important part of the ESSER funding, and that's coming back in the general fund. So we've already included that, but recognizing that, guess what? You can't. Those are already there. You can't add additional staff in addition to those positions already. But we're about $2.5 million up in expenses over last year. Again, and much of that is being driven by growth, and plus recovering from really 2019 in some ways. Some of the things on supplies and stuff where you did not do anything, it's kind of that rebound impact that we're getting back under control. This chart is our grant spending. Just point out, we get about $2.8 million in various federal and state grants. We have spent about $1 million of it so far this year. The big line I want to point out with the federal grants, when you see negatives, they're always going to be negative because you spend the money, then you ask for reimbursement. That's just the way they work. And the ESSER money had been delayed, and the state had the money, but the state had not appropriated it to pay the schools for it. So that's getting caught back up. And frankly, our big budget item in grant money is special education. And that's where we're seeing some improvement in our state restricted funds is special education. And that's probably our fastest growing cost area is special ed. Okay. A couple other things going on in the fiscal office. It's busy. COVID's hit my office. I've had 3 staff members sick with COVID, and we're muddling through fine. We have on February 18th, a big day for us. We transitioned to new state software. Thank goodness. We have no choice. We'd have to. The software that we're on is 30 years old. It's after the state is not going to renew the licensing on this. It's antiquated, and so we're in the last group that's going on the transition. And transitions are pretty good. It's mainly the staff getting familiar with it is the main struggle. We are working on our preliminary official statement for the bond offering. Right now, we have a window to refund those 2016 bonds at a lower interest rate, saves taxpayers. We're looking $2 to $3 million. Now, we're trying to move quickly because with interest rates going the way, that could close. If it closes, we won't do the refunding, but we're trying to get that done. Fiscal audit's going on. For the next 5 weeks, we have state auditors in here doing their thing, and they've been here before. They're familiar with the district. And as I mentioned, Mr. Bennington prior to the meeting, the good news is the state has notified me today that for the next 5 years, if we so choose, we can use an independent auditor. And they're putting that out for bid for us. What that means is faster audit, cheaper audit, and less painful. So it's a testament that getting our financial books in lines from a few years ago. We're working on a banking RFP. That's just I think it's good practice every so often to put out there to the banks, say, hey, what would you do for us if you got our business? We're with Huntington primarily right now, with Huntington right now only, but they're obviously not the only game in town. And James Mapus and I are working on, hopefully to bring to you in March, 10-year capital plan. One of the struggles he has on the operations side is, just like everywhere else, there's all this asking for money. You've got this permanent improvement levy, so you got money, right? And we're going to try to lay out the spending over 10 years, the wish list. First, it's going to show you the wish list is a lot bigger than we have money for. And at the same time, it allows the administration and the board to set priorities. So if someone, hey, we need money on this, we can do it, but what are you going to give up, right? It's going to be choices. And that sets the groundwork for the facilities group. When we get through that work, we got to roll that into it because it's all tied together, right? The operating levies down the road, a bond issue, and permanent improvement, they're interconnected. And you can't, right now, we don't want to do any one of them separately. And so it's really kind of important that we look at it. Because what does the new building have to do with anything? Well, that impacts staffing, which impacts what? The general fund, and potentially a new operating levy. And same on the facility side. If we're going for a bond issue for a new building, are we also putting money in there? Or maybe it's not a new building, maybe it's expanding buildings so we can get rid of the trailers or other major expenses. So all that is happening. So James and I are trying to put together a 10-year visual for you to lay this out. And we've already started, and it already looks pretty scary. Not scary from a number standpoint, just it is a monstrosity, right? Questions?
I have a couple of questions. I might jump around a little bit, but so can you tell me, it looks like you touched upon this a little bit, but from the 5-year forecast that you presented in November to currently, I'm going to round it up, $600,000. Mm-hmm. So do you see that trend continuing in the next couple months? That's
That's a good
jarring.
question, Kelly. My viewpoint is, I've kind of drawn a line in the sand on that. I'm investigating that number. That's probably where we should have been, or somewhere around that. I don't see it getting any worse. Let's put it that way. Okay, so like I know 200,000 of it was just an oversight that should have been in there for our lease payment on our buses. Because if you look at our capital outlay, there was only 221,000 when it was almost 400,000 last year. There was no reason to have a decrease like that. At least the lease payment had gone away. So there's a couple things like that I'm digging into, and I'm learning more about the district finances. I've gone through literally every building supply budget and purchase service budget and looking at line items. We found some things that we're cutting. I cut all the building supply budgets and did some things like that to draw a line in the sand, and we're reevaluating where we are to make sure that trend, it's not a trend, it's a point in time now, and it gets better down the road.
Right. Okay. And then notes and interest. Why the big difference there?
For what? For
Well, yeah.
well, because we have. Okay, so good question.
Yeah.
It's just timing. Essentially, you have for notes and interest that are paid out of general fund. That's even on the bonds. It's twice a year. You make an interest payment typically in December, and you do your principal and interest payment in June. So that's where you see the big payments.
Okay. And then lastly, how do you record the ESSER funds?
What do you mean record?
Well, do you put it up in revenue and then?
This is just general fund.
Oh, okay. So I'm not going to see it on here.
Yeah, there's a separate funds here, are the
Okay.
the ESSER funds.
So where do we find that? Like,
Okay.
how do you?
To
Yeah,
put in
how do I get that?
perspective, in your financial package, there's 4 or 5 pages of all the funds. We've got hundreds
Oh, is that
of
you printed
funds.
off at home?
The general fund is obviously our operating fund. And if we go to this summary, Kelly, this is all our grant funds. So each of these are a separate fund. So like we've got ESSER 2 and ARP ESSER are separate line items. And so we run reports based on those fund numbers.
Okay, so this last page is what?
Yes.
Okay, thank
Yep.
you. But so you never put it in, you never record it in the general fund? So we never see it in revenue then taken out once you collect the money?
Yeah, I would get shot if I
yeah.
did that, yeah.
Yeah.
No, the funds have to be accounted for separately. So because general fund, again, notice that our total grant money is about less than 3 million, and our general fund is over 70. The general fund is our most important fund. Everything else is really relatively small. So they have to be accounted for separately because they're also audited separately. So the auditors who are in now, what they will do, they audit the general fund, and they will pick, because we are the size of what we are, they'll pick 2 of our grant funds, and they typically pick the 2 biggest. So they'll pick special education, IDA, and they'll pick the ESSER, ARP ESSER, and they'll audit them to make sure, obviously, that we have spent the money the way it was intended to be spent. And then they also choose some other things. They'll choose 2 student activity funds, maybe 2 athletic funds to do a quick look at too, to make sure we handle them correctly. But general fund and these are the big audit items.
Okay.
And any district that has more than $750,000 in grant, they have to have 40% of their grant funds audited.
Okay, so if I'm reading this right, then on the only ESSER, the ESSER 2, it looks like that's cleared. I can see where it's 0, so we don't have any of that. Then it's the
American
ARP,
Recovery
thank
Plan.
you.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's what we have left, the 500, almost 600,000.
We have 587,000 left in our allocation. Yes.
Okay, is that guaranteed? Like
Yes.
100% it's guaranteed?
Yes.
Okay.
So that one. So if you go into every district in the state of Ohio files for all these funding applications. So there's an application for the ARP ESSER. If you go in there, it shows what our allocation is. It shows how we plan to spend it, and as long as we spend it to what we
Those
said we were going to,
qualifications.
then we're fine. Now we have the ability to to do minor budget revisions, you know, because you do an application in June or July, and you go, oops, I want to do this. You can do that, but it takes an approval process to do it. So, and it's all public information on what we do there. And but it's all reimbursable. That's the allocation. Then what we do is we file what's called a project cash request, and hopefully within a week we get the money.
Wow.
We've been waiting for about a month now on this one because of some state issues.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Eubanks. Thank you, Mr. Drewer. How do you, so we need you want to come back and we'll handle the vote? Okay, very good. She's ready? Okay. So looking for a motion to approve the December financial report.
So moved.
Mr. Pullman? Was that Ms. Larimer?
Yes.
Okay. And roll call, please.
Mr. Pullman.
Yes.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes.
Mrs. Eubank.
Yes.
Dr. Rufford.
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes. Item 7.2, you're not done yet, depository agreement.
Yes, that's just a routine. You have to every 5 years, and with whatever banking establishments, you have to have a depository agreement. It's kind of a general agreement on what they do with the money. Like, for example, how are they collateralizing it? So by state law, all of our deposits have to be collateralized. So you don't, how should I say it? You're not going to if you have a run on the banks like we did the Great Depression, we get our money.
Okay.
If there aren't any questions on that, I will take a motion to approve the depository agreements.
So moved.
Dr. Rufford?
Second?
Ms. Larimer? And roll call, please.
Dr. Rufford.
Yes.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes.
Mrs. Eubank.
Yes.
Mr. Pullman.
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes. So the next item, item 8, board committee reports, topics for discussions. I'm going to assume over the last week, we're still scheduling and haven't had any meetings, but I'll pause in case I'm misinformed or forgot something. Okay. I will say over at Penta, we did have that meeting last week, and it was nice to see that junior applications, which is kind of a bellwether of what enrollment may be. It's not exactly what enrollment will be, but it was down quite a bit in 2020, the 2020-2021 school year, obviously due to the pandemic, and the numbers are coming back quite a bit, actually almost as high, and in some years higher than what they were 3 or 4 years ago. So really great news to see the kids coming back into the VOTEC programs as well. All right, with that, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. This is going to cover items 11 through, just a second here. Oh, through items 10. Oh, board minutes too, thank you. Item 10 through item 14.5, remembering that we have pulled out the master calendar out of the consent agenda, so. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
Mr. Pullman? Ms. Larimer, roll call, please.
Mr. Pullman.
Yes.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes.
Dr. Rufford.
Yes.
Mrs. Eubank.
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes. So I believe that then takes us to the master calendar discussion. I will, in the organizational meeting, Mr. Hostler had some other conversations about that he wanted to have with the ad hoc committee at the union and some board members. So I think I will put him on the spot a little bit, but ask him to catch us up on those discussions.
Sure. So the conversations, again, the reasons why we went over at the last meeting, looking at the calendar, the state testing window, when the breaks occur, trying to balance the number of days between quarters and semester, and then first and last day of school, professional development, and then the teaching hours and contracts. So all those things go into the they're all ingredients into the stew that becomes the school calendar. So since the last week, we did get feedback from members of the board, administrators, employees, and families who saw and heard. We did meet with representatives in the teacher contract. It's required to have an ad hoc committee to offer input. We don't have to follow that, but it is important to get their input in terms of their comments. So we did have that meeting. And so based on all of those inputs, what we're showing here is that the board members, we appreciate the feedback from all the folks that we spoke to, including board members. The winter break, we heard that we didn't want students to return on Friday as we had presented. So in this proposal, you see us moving off of having students return on that Friday. Also, we heard that folks didn't want students returning on Tuesday, January 10th, which is pretty late into the season. So this recommendation does not do that. We heard a lot of discussion at the boardroom, and then even with the teachers, significant discussion about a fall break. But a group of teachers, the elementary teachers specifically, said we really don't want there to be any breaks in October because that is the testing window for state testing. It's very disruptive, getting the kids in and getting them in a schedule and then working around the different testing windows. So looking at that, we weren't able to accomplish an October fall break like some folks had desired. But we did look at the first week of November, adding a day before the election. So for families, that creates a 4-day week or weekend. For staff, it's a 3-day week. So that was a tip of the hat to trying to do something in the fall. And then with the spring, this recommendation moves the spring break up 1 week. So a number of years ago, we followed the Easter holiday, and so break would either be before or after Easter, depending on when it would fall. And after going deep into April, we had discussions about let's establish a kind of a static spring break, which was the last week in March. So we've been doing that for a number of years now. But with the changes and that we're trying to accomplish in the other areas, and then being very close to Easter itself, and traditionally we have a day off for Good Friday, we moved up that spring break. So when you pull up the calendar and look at that, you begin to see what that looks like in terms of how it lays out here. So that's kind of all the changes from the last presentation to where we are. With calendar, I can tell you, and the teachers were a great example. They work here in the district. Many of them have children in the district. They all have very strong opinions, and just among themselves, not being able to agree on how they would like it. And we heard that at the board meeting too. Some people like having a short run up to Christmas, and more time afterwards relaxing. And we also hear from families saying, no, that run up to Christmas is when it's all fun. After New Year's, just get them back, we're done. And so all those kinds of things. So no matter what you do, there will be people that will want it to be different. That's the one thing that you can count on, is that the final calendar, there's no perfect calendar. And when you really start saying, okay, well, if we move this day here, then we have to do something here. Now you're undoing something that either you or others, it's important to them. So we go through this process every calendar. So that's where we landed, and certainly happy to follow the board's direction.
Questions or comments on the calendar as presented?
Yeah, I wanted to have a discussion and share some of the feedback I heard from the community. And that was in regards to a couple things. And one was spring break. Tom did say consistently we have had it the last week of March. And I know since my daughter started, I think it was 2012, it has been the last week of March. And I think that's important for the community, for consistency. I took a peek at 2024, and with the way Easter falls, it most likely will be the last week of March as well. So I heard that from the community. And for me, my baseline, I always think, it's really what works for the parents. Kids, a day off is a day off. A snow day could be, a Wednesday, a Tuesday. It's not relevant to them. So again, the feedback I heard was having the 2 days off in November, which the 8th we have off because it's election day and our buildings are used. That's not a day a working parent would have off. So to have that then Monday off, that's really 2 days that someone is going to struggle with childcare. And that's just, 2 arbitrary days that, we have off. I realized that the 7th, that was one of the days we gave up for Christmas break and then, inserted it there. Most likely over a holiday, you would have that day off. So, again, what I heard in the community, if spring break was the last week in March, as it consistently has been, and you then apply that to Good Friday, which would be April 6th, there's a good percentage of people that would have that day off, right, for employment. It's a recognized holiday, as opposed to an arbitrary Monday where, again, you aren't going to have the percentage of people having that day off. And then again, you would, have a nice 3-day weekend there. So my recommendation, and again, what I heard from the community, is keeping with consistency and moving it to the last week of March. And then the 7th, we would recognize Good Friday on April 6th.
It's April 7th.
Oh, thank you, golly.
Yeah.
Thank you, April 7th. I also looked in 2021, that was what we did too. We went on spring break, we came back, we had 4 days of school, and then we had Good Friday off. And I heard great things about that. One of the other things somebody told me in the community, they for spring break to be around Easter, they can't take off that time. So therefore, and again, not everybody travels or, staycation, whatever, that for their employment, that unfortunately they just can't travel during that holiday weekend. So again, it might be beneficial for people to have it the last week in March.
And what was the reason for the change? I thought it always had been around Easter. So has Easter been around the last week of March in the past, and this year it's later, or?
Actually, I looked it up. No, in 2026, Good Friday was on March 25th.
In 2026?
Yeah, I went back that far.
2016.
2026 hasn't
Oh my
happened yet.
golly, thank you. My daughter graduates in 2026, that's probably why I was thinking that. Sorry, 2016.
Okay.
2017, it was April 14th, and again, spring break was the last week of March. 2018, Good Friday was March 30th. That week was the 1 week that it did correspond and overlay with spring break, Good Friday. And then in 2019, it was April 19th. In 2020, it was April 10th. In 2021, it was April 2nd. And then this year, or 2022, April 15th. That's not right. That's not right, is it?
And so this year it's?
It would be the 7th, sorry. It'd be the 7th.
April
The
9th.
7th.
So
7th,
then it's
excuse me, the
easier
7th.
to incorporate it into spring break with it being as early as the 9th then, right?
Yeah, we've only had it incorporated into spring break one time in the last 7 years, yeah.
Well, Easter's one of those rolling holidays. Is there a reason that it was, I think I lost that argument. Why was it moved from the last week of March to incorporate Easter, just so that it could incorporate Easter? Is that why it was moved from the last week of March, Tom?
So for this calendar, do you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
So-
that was changed, right?
Yeah.
Was it originally the last week of March, and now it's moved to the first week of April?
Right. So,
Okay.
so the way that it was set up was to have the last week in March, and then there would be the Good Friday, which is the 7th. So hearing from folks, the feedback was, when you look at September, October, and November, there really is no break, in those months. So there was a lot of discussion about, what can we do to create a sort of fall break to break that up for families. So we heard that, and then the testing window comes into so that by moving up that week, taking that week off, that incorporates Good Friday, so it's not an additional day off. And then that additional day then can be slotted over to the November 7th to kind of give that break.
That's
So
what I
that
missed.
was part of
Okay.
it. The other
Well, I see the logic in it
the other
then.
piece that is important with this is spring break and testing. So the windows that we have for testing is we have a number of days that we want to have consecutively for students with testing, and that's why waiting to hear back from the state when that testing window is going to occur.
Usually the middle 2 weeks of April, the middle to those
yeah.
3 weeks in April in there, give or take?
That's where it sometimes lands. So we have 15 consecutive days, of instruction that would occur in that window. So that's a good thing. Whereas if we had the week off the first week in March and then that one day, then it really limits how many consecutive days in a row. So we heard that from staff who have to prepare the students. So that's one of the challenges with having, those pieces off.
So by moving it just 1 week, that gives a little bit of a respite in November, and then gives us a block of time during testing windows to be able to handle whatever that may bring.
Right.
So that's the logic, okay.
Yeah.
Well, you really have the same break, September, October, as you do, you come back from break January, and then you have February, and then the whole month of March. So that logic, I understand what you're saying, but you still have no break from, really Christmas until spring break, which is again pushed back a week.
Well, except you have President's Day and Martin Luther King Day,
Yeah.
so you have a day off.
Well, you have September, you have Labor
So-
Day, and,
March is, in September, you've got Labor Day.
right. So I'm saying it's
So
equals
March
the
is going to
same.
be a non-holiday month.
Right.
That's my least favorite month. I don't know. I don't think.
It also pushes
Make
it
a
up.
happy day in there somewhere.
I mean, that's the longest you have consistently going. I think I counted it's 12 weeks without, might be 11. So if you move it up one more, you have that last week of March, and then you go 6 more weeks and school's out, as opposed to going 7. I mean, 8, you just move it up one more week. So it's almost more of a balance. But again, that's what I heard in the community, and I'm happy to pass it along.
So the main benefit of doing it this way is to provide that respite in November. So that's adding an extra day. No, it's not adding an extra day to Thanksgiving. It's adding an extra day at Election Day.
Yeah, and that's what I heard where, that's, for working parents, you already have, no one gets election day off. So you already have
Yeah.
2 days now. That's a struggle for finding daycare. Now, if I'm not mistaken, one time we had to move up spring break to earlier in March because of the window that will be testing. I mean, what if the possibility comes back that it's right after spring break? You don't really want the testing to be It's usually in April. So again, the logic was if you move it back in March, where it's always been, then you can have those weeks coming back where it's not like you get back from spring break and then you take a test that week.
One of the things, to me, when you go where you go, is not really an issue as a board member for me. I don't hear from parents a lot. I hear from the staff more. And there's a lot of parameters to put together a calendar. Haven't been on that side of the table to know what that's like. So some of the parameters that we may not see, the administrators and the teachers see, and the testing seems to be what's driving this. The number of consecutive days you have to be able to have 15 days.
Yeah, I know Mr. Swartzmiller's here. I don't know, Brian, if you want to offer your insights, so.
Yes, the state provides that you have 15 consecutive days per test. The ask in Perrysburg is a little bit different, because I will hear, well, Mommy does it, well, Anthony Wayne does it. So let me put it in context. If I look at our K-2 population, just as an example, we were doing professional development for K-2, intervention specialists, reading specialists, and principals. We have 82. If I took Anthony Wayne and Mommy combined with that same population, we have 86. We just have that many more kids to run through our computer labs to get testing done, especially at the elementary level. So we need 15 consecutive days. So as is proposed at that first week in April right now, we have a 15-day block before spring break, and we have a 20-day block after spring break. It's not going to be divided. It's pretty clear cut. If you moved it to the last week in March and Good Friday, what we would have is 10 days, then 5 days off, and then a 4-day week and a day off, and then a block of days after. There's no way to have an isolated ELA block and then a math science block. And it does change year to year based on Good Friday, because you know Easter sort of floats throughout the month of April. So some months, yeah, it's doable to do at the end of March. This presented a possibility where this just made sense and gave us the ability to have longer testing blocks. Because we have the challenge of more students. That's what it is. And then makeups. Because it's great if everybody shows up, but that never happens.
That never happens.
Extended test makeup testing block as well. So the way it's presented basically is reflective of giving us a large window to get the testing in an effective manner.
Is the testing in March or April? I thought it was in April.
Well, it begins in March. So we have had, for example, maybe we've had a shorter window before spring break and a longer after. So we've been able to do maybe ELA after. With this, most likely we would take the ELA test before spring break and then worry about math, science, and social studies after based on the calendar.
Okay. And you still don't know, the state still hasn't told you
I
when.
don't know exactly what's mirrored from last year's
Yeah.
testing window, which was similar to the year before. The state's very timely in letting us know this stuff, right? But I'm going
Sarcasm.
by past precedent.
Okay, all right. Well, I think that makes a lot of sense, because I know the headache of trying to do those testings, and anything that we can do to help that go along a little bit more smoothly, and God help us that COVID has settled down by then a little bit, so we don't deal with that as much.
And then after the vote, and no matter what the board decides, we could be back in another month, 6 weeks, saying, well, we got the testing window and we're going to have to make this change, so.
Change it again. And
you
we've
know,
changed before. We've had to
happened,
change the
yeah,
calendar
yeah.
before, so.
So
Wait.
there, you know, it really is a stew, and there's different ingredients that go in, and it still will be good. It still will work. It's just what flavor do you want, and that's where it comes down to. So,
It's a great analogy.
yeah.
Okay.
Anything else on the conversation here? So, you know, Ms. Eubanks, you know, you've certainly raised up some nice concern and made some really good points. That, you know, I think to proceed here, would you like to make a proposal to the board, a resolution to change the calendar as it's presented?
I mean, I think it sounds like, no. Does everybody like this calendar? Do you know what pen it is? Because actually, someone else did say, I know this year it's not. And so, you know, that is a conflict, you know, when you have so many kids go to that school and it's not the same week, so.
They used to try to follow schedules, but then they're on their own because of the quagmire that causes. So,
Yeah, but you don't know when that is.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
So thank you. So in lieu of a resolution, then, I need a motion to accept the calendar as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Second, and roll call, please.
Yes.
Mr. Pullman,
Yes.
Mrs. Eubank,
Yes.
Dr. Reffert,
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes. And again, thank you for the conversation. That was a very good conversation.
So since it went so well, we can start the following year's calendar next board meeting. Does that
Please,
sound?
that would be great. Thank you.
It'll probably be the end of March.
Okay. Next item to this is a board discussion of any new items.
Wait a minute, let me catch up. I'm on the wrong page. So are we on 15?
We're on 15, what I believe is now
Okay.
15.2, 15.1.
I would like to address the email that we all received from Mrs. Vandervell about what we did in the changing of the board work session. I felt your email was well thought out, and you brought up some good points. And I wasn't real comfortable with the change. I understand the change. I didn't feel that all options to make sure that it was still going to be able to be viewed online, especially in light of COVID, were really given full strength. No offense to the B&I group, and I meant to call some of my friends in that group. But I think the board work takes precedence over an outside group using our facilities, which I don't mean that to sound snarky, but it's a situation here that I think is important now that we have this videotaping available for the public, and the wonderful reception that it's received and the amount of participation that it's getting, I think is encouraging for us to know that people are watching and pay attention. So I think that's important to honor that. I know we can't do Thursday mornings. I know we can't do Tuesday mornings. I think we need to investigate an afternoon time. Not every other district does a crack of dawn work session. But I just wondered if, I mean, I know we're not going to make a decision right now, but I would like that to be looked at maybe again to make sure that every single option, I know Mondays and Fridays are not, Monday would be not a good choice. That would not be a good choice for people, I'm sure. But I'm just wondering if there isn't some other option to really thoroughly look at that so that we can keep that videotaped like we have with the other one since we've done this.
What about a recording?
So yeah, one thing that didn't come up in last week's discussion is Mr. Hosser and I have been talking about what technology is available to allow the community to hear, watch, or listen, or both, to the discussions that we have in those work sessions. I do think that is, you know, we didn't used to do it before, but that doesn't mean, you know, certainly the environment has changed. The community needs, desires to hear the discussion. I think it's important that this community is hearing every single word every single board member says on the various topics we have. I would not be against reopening that to make sure that we're all comfortable with that decision for the community.
You have to
I
go back
agree.
and recall, 2 years ago, work sessions were not recorded. The purpose and the reason why we started recording and streaming is because we Zoomed as a board, and because the law says public has to be able to participate and view it, we said, well, this is the best way the public could view it, is to Zoom it and stream it. work session. Because Wednesdays, there's a group that's used it and have had it in their calendar for years, and it's a business group here in Perrysburg. We didn't want to move them out. You mentioned, okay, Mondays aren't good, Thursdays aren't good, so pick a day, but you're saying going in an afternoon, like a 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock type meeting?
Yeah.
I agree. I don't think we explored all the options. The question I have is, do they meet every Wednesday? So it's not like the
believe they
third
do.
Wednesday,
I believe they
Every
meet
Wednesday?
every Wednesday, yes. And this is, I've participated in some of those meetings. It is a very good group of people.
And there's like 60 people in that
That's a
particular
The space
B&I
works very well
group,
for them. Now,
yeah.
granted, they don't need things
The thing you-
videotaped or, streamed like we know
Is-
we want to.
Thing
Is
you
there-
gotta look out there too is, you all have schedules too. You're all, like Tom said, we're not just board members. You have families, you have other opportunities, you have other jobs, other committees you serve on. So here we are in January, we're going into February, we gotta pick a day, a time, and a date. Because I know when I put in today's committee meetings, and all the meetings we have that we're obligated to, that were not filmed or recorded, but public can attend, it's full, right? So I've got them blocked in, all my activities that I've chosen to do as a citizen in this community and other places. So I've got Wednesday morning, 7:30 blocked in for the whole year. Now, if we decide to change that, you've got some other, I've got some problems because I've got calendars already figured out for personnel, for finance, for other committees that I'm involved with other organizations. So we got to do that tonight. I don't think we can just sit back and stew on it. If we could record it, that would be great, so we can keep our
Yeah, that
Wednesday.
would be all right.
Yeah,
to
if we could
read.
record, I think that would be great.
I would like to pursue first, what are the recording options upstairs in 35 first, video or audio? That'd be my,
Yeah,
that's
I'd
my
be
preference.
okay with that.
Well, is there another, was it looked at, is there another room that this meeting, not this meeting, but the group can meet at? I mean, can they meet over here in the gymnasium and we move chairs in there,
Or
or
the auditorium.
auditorium? Yeah, that's a nice meeting place.
So I did approach the group and said that, just put them on notice that they might not be able to meet here on those days. And so the size of their group, where else in the community can they go? And so they wanted to know, just let us know, we'll do whatever. I did bring up the auditorium and other spaces, and for the kind of activities and things that they do, those would not work, so.
The third floor, the bigger room up
Not-
there?
That's not.
They fill this
room up.
place is
This is
full.
along the
Yeah,
walls.
plus
yeah.
that room is already booked with professional development and other things, so we have staff, while that's going on here on Wednesday mornings, those other rooms are,
Yeah.
so we went in, and reserved that room, as well, so.
So my understanding is then we're going to look at first audio recording like we used to.
Yeah, in fact, I'm trying something out earlier, just a audio to see how I left it here. So
Yeah.
we'll try it out and see what the quality is. The video stuff we can take a look at. There's certain things that with schools, if you're visiting with grandma and grandpa or family, you can put up an iPad and do that. But with schools, there are certain requirements that we have to fulfill with closed captioning and ADA. So if we're going to post those things to our website, which we do, or link it, that's one of the things that we have to figure out. So we have to, it's a matter of doing it and having the quality, but also if we want to do it right and meet those requirements, which we have been, we have to make sure that we're doing it in a way that satisfies that.
I had totally forgotten about the
Yeah, so.
ADA and all that stuff
Yeah,
that you have to
so-
do.
So putting it on YouTube, they do that. That's part of the service. That's why we chose them as one of the hosts. So putting it in another site. So there's some things that we're trying to figure out a workaround. And audio is the lowest, and if we can figure out a way with cameras and do that. But for us, this operation, we have somebody who is controlling it to make sure it's being streamed all the time. So. So it's a little bit of a production, for us to do that, to do it right. So.
That's the other thing I was thinking, I mean, we hire him, like, is he under a contract? And then when we don't do it live, we're we're paying him, but he's not.
He's actually working over his day. So this
Oh,
is,
okay.
He's in the technology department. So he has a full-time job and then does this, and we pay him hourly for any time that there's a board meeting or anything like that. So
I saw that on the consent agenda. Okay, so that's in addition to, it's not like we're taking
not
away hours from him
contracted.
if he doesn't, okay. Okay.
So we're going to continue with Thursday's room 35.
Wednesdays?
Wednesdays. Here we go.
We'll do it on Thursday,
wanna go-
you just don't come, Eric.
Yeah.
Well, that's what works with the
Wednesdays.
group, right? That's what, you have it, can you
But
all-
with the
that's what
goal of this, being able to deliver some sort of playback
Yeah.
for the community.
Yeah, as
And-
long,
and if
I think
that-
that that's fair, as long as we know that that's being worked on, I think it's worth shooting for that. And see if we can get that part of it fixed, because that's what's, I don't mind it going to Wednesday. Yeah, I don't mind it going to, I stop and think, wait, what day am I talking about? I don't mind it going to Wednesday, I minded the fact that what we did caused it to not be something that people can go back and view later. So if that's being worked on, I'm okay with that.
Right, so you
To
have
see
notes
what
of the
we can-
meeting, and you have the audio.
We have the press that attends and.
Yeah, so they would know, and again, a work session's more informing the board of, there's not really much discussion other than the,
Well, and that's another key to this too, is making sure that the big issue, define big, but the hot issues that we're talking, it's an informative session. It's not really driven at a decision-making session.
we're not really
We want- we-
voting in the work sessions.
We want to make sure we're focused on doing those in regular meetings, where there can be public participation, where we can hear what we need to hear.
Correct, right. And yeah, I don't want to mean to take away anybody's entertainment for Tuesday mornings, but I know we committed to Wednesdays, and we can make it work with the audio if that works. If that works, and then we'll get the
Yeah,
transcript.
I think if that works, that's a good compromise. But I too heard from somebody else, so I do appreciate your email. I haven't responded yet, but I heard from a couple other people that, they were concerned and have enjoyed it. I myself sometimes go back and think, no, what was said? What did that say? And go back and listen. So I've enjoyed it as well. So I think it's important to
Yeah,
keep that going.
The thing that really, it's a word that's been used quite a bit about transparency. This board has never wanted anything but transparency. And, to have the audio, if that's what it takes, that's fine. But to have visual, I don't think, again, I'm not sure if they're meeting at Panera Bread early to watch the film, the video or not, but I think it should work Wednesdays if we can get the audio. That'd be great.
All right,
Okay,
thanks for working on that, Tom.
thank you. Okay, speaking of public participation, this is we'll now open up the floor again for our second public participation for items that are were not on the agenda. So again, Ms. Menke. And again,
3 minutes, yes.
name and address in 2 minutes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Laura Minke, 950 Lober Drive. I have one daughter in high school. We seem to have a reoccurring issue for the class of 2023. And I know that things have been very difficult with COVID and what has happened, but there have been multiple things this year that I noticed that class in particular is missing out. And I don't know about the freshman class or the sophomore class or the senior class, but they are things that are very important to the future of our children, the future of our students, especially those who are going on to college. It started out earlier this year with all of the class not being signed up for PSAT. And I know that was canceled last year because of us not being in school and our issues with COVID. However, we should have gone back and taken care of those students in the 11th grade and signed up every single kid like we traditionally do. And it was on if you talk to your counselor, we'll sign you up. And it took a fight and some emails from me to get us to pay for it. We traditionally sign up every single kid unless a parent opts out, and we pay for every kid. And this is something that we overlooked. And for parents who have been through this before and have older kids, you know how important the PSAT is. That affects them for the National Merit Scholarship. It also affects them for scholarships that are offered in college. Our latest issue, which I'm hoping that all of you will address, and that will also go back and closely examine everything for all the students in the high school and really all of our grades. There's a 9th and 10th grade career day coming up. Once again, because of the last 2 years with COVID, the 11th grade has not been able to participate in this. These are kids who need to look at career options, college options, certificated options, and they're being skipped again. I implore all of you to talk to administrators, the counselors, and get this fixed. I don't want to see this for any more of our kids. As board members, you should know that on the state report card, there is a spot for college and career readiness. And we do not always, actually, since it's been on there, I do not believe that we have done very well. And this is an area where we can step up and try harder. I also suggest that we look at our other area schools around here and take a cue from them and what they do. With my experience, I can tell you to go look at Ottawa County. The Ottawa County Improvement Corp actually helps out their schools. So please recognize that these kids need help, and it is your job as their school to help them get there. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Schneider, if you'd like to address the board. 2 minutes, and if you would state your name and address for the record, please.
Brittany Schneider, address is 5001 Prestonwood Road. 3 kids. I have been emailing the school board and school facilities faculty regarding the different quarantine guidelines for the vaccinated and unvaccinated. I understand that the difference pertains to out-of-school exposure and not in school, because we currently have to mask only during school hours. But why are we still having these different rules when we know that the vaccinated get and spread this virus just as the unvaccinated do? How are we using science when we state that if you have a COVID positive person in your home and you are vaccinated and showing no symptoms, you can come to school? Whereas if you're unvaccinated and as the same, showing no symptoms, you cannot come to school. We know this vaccine does not stop COVID or the spread, so please stop implying that it does. On December 17th, an email was sent from our COVID team reminding parents that everyone over 5 can be vaccinated and to send in updated cards. My fear is that with pushing parents to get their kids' updated vaccine records over to the schools and get boosters for the older kids, this will ultimately lead to continued discrimination towards the unvaccinated for when we decide to make masks optional again. And as the CDC has recently stated, cloth masks are not as effective as surgical masks or respirators against COVID. When will we start using real science to help with logical guidelines? And when will we stop using political science to guide our schools? I see the evil, unjust treatments that's happening in the US, in the workforce, our healthcare systems, the cities, everyday living, and our schools, including Perrysburg. We cannot be afraid to question anyone any longer. And I will end with what I said in the fall at another school board meeting, a very cringe-worthy statement, especially when dealing with our children, my children. Follow the money. Please return whatever ESSER funds we have used, not used, and if it's tied, just stop getting it. Please stand up for our kids, for the unvaccinated. If you choose to do that, vaccinate, go ahead. Just stand up and use your voices as leaders and question. And
Thank
that's
you,
it.
Ms. Schneider. That's 2 minutes. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for participation and your comments tonight. Next on the agenda is need a motion for executive session for the purpose of preparing for, conducting, or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with employees.
Before we do that, did one of the speakers talk about Career Day?
Yes.
Okay, didn't we just receive something today about Career Day? I think we did, okay. All right, I'm sorry.
Thank you for the clear. There will be no action anticipated from the board following the executive session. So do I have a motion to go into executive
I'll
session?
make a motion, we go to executive session.
Second?
Second?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Pullman,
Yes.
Dr. Reffert,
Yes.
Mrs. Eubank,
Yes.
Ms. Larimer,
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes. We are now in executive session, and we will take a 5-minute break before. We'll take a break.
It's here.
Usually here, we kick everybody.